Welcome to Face to Face. This is a show about change and about what's next. It's a show that wants to ask questions, peel back the layers of our average everyday experience, and go beyond scratching the surface. We interview amazing people with incredible ideas and stories who have done wild, weird, and wonderful things. Remember that imagination shared creates collaboration, and collaboration creates community, and community inspires social change. I'm David Peck, and this is Face to Face. So my next guest is Holly Gordon. She's the co-founder and CEO of Girl Rising, an amazing organization. You're going to need to check them out online. I had an absolutely delightful time and not enough time to unpack some of the things that we talked about. Holly and I talked about girls' education transforming society. We talked about ideological implications of what's happening around the world. We talked about attitudes and structural problems and about shifts in thinking and the gap between the head and the heart, and why is it that Google always wants numbers, and where do relationships actually fit into this? She's a journalist. She is a filmmaker. She was named as by Newsweek and Daily Beast as one of 125 women of impact. Forbes Magazine has also named the Girl Rising movement the number one most dynamic social initiative back in 2012. So check out Girl Rising. You're going to enjoy this conversation. It was an absolute delight for me. Please also davidpecklive.com to find out. We're about to publish our 150th. We may have even gone beyond that podcast. You'll see more there at davidpecklive.com. We've got some great people coming up. Rabble.ca. You can find them there on iTunes. And we'll see you real soon. You're going to enjoy this interview with Holly Gordon. Well, welcome to Face to Face. We're joined by a very special guest today. Holly Gordon is joining us. She's the co-founder and CEO of an organization called Girl Rising. We're about to find out a little bit more about her and the organization. Holly, thanks for joining us today.
Thank you so much, David. It's a pleasure to be here.
So why education? Why advocacy? What is so important about changing the way I think?
Well, it's interesting, and I'm going to separate those two questions.
Okay, yeah,
First, why
please.
education, and secondly, why advocacy? Why education? Well, I would put it to you. What has education given you, or given any one of your listeners? Education is freedom. Education is financial security. Education is safety. Almost anyone who is a productive member of society reaps the rewards of their economic rewards by using their brain and their critical thinking skills and their knowledge of the world and their ability to process and access and process information. And so without education, the four walls of your life are very much closer to your nose, if you will, right? And so the more education, the more the walls of your life can expand, and the more opportunities and choices you can have in your life, and the more prosperous and healthier you will be. And as a result, the more prosperous and healthier your offspring will be, and the more stable your country will be. And it's no different for girls than boys. But unfortunately, because of traditions and gender-based discrimination, many girls around the world don't have equal access to education as boys. And so over the last 20 years, there's a lot of focus on education. Education is a very difficult thing to measure. It's also a very difficult thing to provide. We know that certainly in the United States, there's a lot of controversy about how good our public education system is, but we do have one. We have a public education that's open to boys and girls through the age of 18, provided by the state. But around the world, that's not the case. Education beyond primary school, and even sometimes including primary school, costs money. And once economics are involved, it's more likely that a family will pay for their boy to become educated than their girl, and that a girl will be valued for her body rather than her mind. And that devaluation of a girl's mind sets off a cycle of devaluation for the rest of her life, whether that be for her own health and security and economic productivity, but then also for her children. And so you perpetuate a generational holding back, if you will.
Do you think?
So,
Do you think it is? I mean, it's gender disparity. Clearly, is it based in culture? Do you think, to some degree, Holly, or is it simpler than that, or is it way deeper than that?
Well, in my experience, I mean, I can't talk to every place in every part of the world.
Right, of course, yeah.
But in my experience, it is based around traditional roles around hunter-gatherer versus keeping the home, and protecting the sort of procreational piece of development, i.e., a girl turns into a woman who has babies, and the human race goes on.
Right.
And so, but and it's usually, it's gender based because of a woman's ability to reproduce. So, in many places, if the tradition is that a woman can't be seen in the marketplace, well, then she can't participate in commerce, and then her greatest value is going to be caring for children. And how much education do you need to care for children?
Right.
Or she's going to be married, and then she's going to bring all of whatever economic benefit, whether that be the caretaking at home or a job. She's going to bring whatever economic benefit to her husband's family. So why would I invest in my daughter when she's going to go belong to someone else down the road? Right. So it's multi-layer, but yeah, it's tradition and it's cultural and it's attitude is what I'm getting at. It's not. There are structural barriers to education, which are there aren't enough schools, the teachers don't show up, there aren't books or school supplies. But then there are attitudinal barriers, which is you're a girl, you have no value, I'm not investing in you.
Are girls seen as not as bright? Or is it truly just connected to, well, my son's going to be a better farmer, therefore, or he can lift heavier boxes? Do you know what I mean?
No, I mean, again, I can't speak for everyone around the world, but I think it's more like it doesn't matter how bright she is because she's just going to have babies. It's sort of like, why would I send you to college? You're just going to get married and have babies. I mean, that was a viewpoint in this country.
Yep.
Why is she here? She's just getting her MRS degree.
It's an extension of the woman's places in the home, and
that's right. That's right.
Yeah.
And the reason that can change has everything to do with certainly in this country and in the developed world, there are now machines that can take the burden away from a woman. We have laundry, we have laundry machines and dishwashers, and the very acts of survival that are necessary, right? Have been replaced in much of the developing world, but they're still necessary in the developed world. But they're still necessary in the developing world. And so what the shift is, and it's actually links to a book that's just out by Anne Marie Slaughter called Unfinished Business, is the devaluation of the role of caring. That caring has always been a woman's role.
Right.
Nursing, teaching, staying at home with your children. And as sort of societies open up and become more equal, so that role of caring must too be equally shared. Otherwise, you'll never get gender parity, because if you undervalue caring, then it will always, by undervaluing caring, it will mean that traditional gender roles persist.
I interviewed a woman last week whose documentary film called Wasted is appearing tonight on CBC, The Nature of Things, and she follows an alcoholic who reoffends and falls back into his old ways, et cetera, et cetera. Anyway, the whole film's based on compassionate-based evidence care, which I think is really a wonderful sort of way to look at it, a wonderful phrase. You got that sort of hard, rational, scientific edge, the numbers, the data, the evidence. But hang on a minute here. Let's not forget that there's a human element here that we do need to share. That's right. We are all in this together, right?
And you hear stories in the 1950s of men who went to work every day and never saw their kids,
and
that was their job, right?
Yeah.
And you talk to a
boggles
modern
my
father,
mind, Holly. As a dad with 8 and 10-year-old, boggles my mind.
There you go. But you talk to a modern father, and he says, "I need to make time for my family." Well, that's a humongous shift, and that's a shift in caring. That's a shift in thinking, well, you know, a kid needs his mother. No, his kid needs a mother and a father. Right? And workplaces need women and men, and every race, because we are, you know, I love watching television today because American television is so much more reflective of a multicultural, you know, society that we live in. You know, I remember the days when you turned on television and you would not ever see a black face. And now you have, my daughter just introduced to me to a show called How to Get Away with Murder, with Viola Davis is the lead character playing this lawyer. And I didn't grow up with any television shows that had a lead black female character, right? And so that is about attitudes changing. That is how you change attitudes, which leads me to your first question, which is about advocacy, right? So I am not an advocacy person. I'm a journalist. And I came to Girl Rising as a journalist with a team at the Documentary Group, which is a film company started originally by Peter Jennings, a proud Canadian.
Thank you. Very nice plug. I like it.
That's right.
Do you want to talk? Peter, actually, do you want to shift gears and talk about our good-looking Prime Minister? Would that?
He's a great champion for women. I really like him.
I'm a big fan, as most of my listeners probably know.
Well, that's so great. I loved what he said on the first day.
Oh, isn't that awesome?
Because the makeup of his cabinet, you know, and I'd love to be out of the world of advocating for women and girls because I wish it would just be a fait accompli. I mean, it's like, really? Do we have to be talking?
Well, I love, you know, you hear stuff and you go, hang on a minute, we are in the 21st century, aren't we? You know, that's right. That's kind of been my line. Yeah.
So
you came out of journalism?
Advocacy. So I came out of journalism, and we were asked to research how do you break cycles of poverty as journalists, and take a look at that very big, complex, big, hairy question. And what came out of that research was we didn't go in with a gender bias, but what came out is that if you can educate girls through adolescence and give them the skills and training that allow them to be full participants in society, you can break poverty in just one generation. Because for each year of education that a girl achieves in secondary education, her income rises by 10%. That is not insignificant. Women are 80% of the crop growers around the world. You educate a girl further through adolescence, she grows more food. She's 50% more likely to vaccinate her children.
I mean, come on, Holly.
Survive over the age of 5.
There's such a deep irony to this that just it kind of cracks me up in a way. You know, I mean, I grew up, and when I say cracks me up, it infuriates me in the sense that, okay, so hang on a second here. We're going to invest in boys because they're way better than girls are for whatever reason, X, Y, and Z. But actually, when you start looking at the numbers and digging down, what you find is completely the opposite, it sounds.
Well, yeah. I mean, the ripple effect of investing in a boy is not as deep and deeply embedded in society. Now, I choose to think that the reason that boys have been invested in over time over girls is not for any kind of nefarious reason. It's because the world was a dangerous place. And if you were going to let someone go out of the house, it should be the stronger person. Right. And we have grown up from a hunter-gatherer root. And so we live in a patriarchy. And so it just, anyway. But advocacy was not what we were after. What we were after was we were journalists who discovered this truth, that girls' education transforms societies. And that in the world today, I mean, you're a participant, there is distribution for everyone now. It used to be when Peter Jennings or before him Walter Cronkite sat down at the evening news desk, the world listened. And that an article on the front page of the New York Times could move Congress because enough people, or even my favorite example is FDR. FDR would sit down on a Sunday night and deliver a fireside chat, and everyone in America was listening. Right. Just imagine if the president had the year of every American the way FDR had. You could make change quickly.
Sure.
But today, if you have the most important story of our time, how do you distribute it? How do you make sure people hear it? And so that is where Girl Rising was born. Girl Rising was born as a film project that then became, for lack of a better word, a distribution experiment. And the distribution today, to distribute content today, to me, is deeply rooted in finding partnership. It's finding other organizations or individuals who share your beliefs, who share a common understanding with you, and if you can be the content creator, they will help you speed that content around the world. And so we created partnerships. We created partnerships with nonprofit organizations. We created partnerships with some of the greatest performers in the world today, Meryl Streep, Anne Hathaway, Alicia Keys, Liam Neeson. We created partnerships with the Intel Corporation, and we worked with CNN to distribute across CNN. So we created partnerships with philanthropists like Paul Allen, who very generously was a very generous and early funder of Girl Rising. But each one of these, we created partnerships with policy leaders like Rebecca Winthrop at the Brookings Foundation, the Brookings Institute. Every one of these partners brought an area of expertise and an ability to reach an audience. And so our job was to create really compelling content, and their job was to bring audiences together through their various, influences to ingest that content and be inspired by that content, and then bring change in whatever community they may live in.
So Holly, it's kind of my world, this whole idea of social change. How do you, the question as a philosopher I continue to ask is, how do I get somebody to care about the global south? Do I get them on a plane? My country I work in, Cambodia, I'm working on a project up in the northern part, agricultural system. How do I get people to give a rat's ass about this part of the world, right? And in the same way, so you can get somebody to hear the message. But, have you guys found out a way? I love your site and how you say, I think you say basically we want to change the world through storytelling, which is so cool. Is there something about that resonates in a way that numbers don't, that PowerPoint presentations don't?
There's a big gap between head and heart. And you know this, I'm sure, that, research shows that you can quote data. And if you walk into Google, I love the folks at Google. They always want to talk to you about your numbers.
Right. Right.
But I can tell you that, there are 62 million girls around the world who are not in school today. Or I can tell you a story of Soka in Cambodia, who grew up picking trash on a trash heap in Phnom Penh. And, how she was rescued, and she's now, in school and graduated top of her class. She was an orphan, right, who literally picked trash for 3 years to survive with her sister. And we tell these individual stories in Girl Rising. They aren't stories of, people say, gosh, your girls in Girl Rising are so incredible and extraordinary. Soka, Senna, Roxana, Azmira, the girls whose stories we tell in Girl Rising. And I say, no, they're not. They're extraordinary stories about ordinary girls. And the reason I say that is because by getting to know one girl, you get to know millions.
Yeah.
And so it's the power of making the individual connection. It's kind of like gossip, right?
Okay.
Gossip websites basically are just trading in the latest news about human beings. And the more you read about those human beings, the more you actually think you might actually know them. You're friends with them. They're part of your life. Did you hear that thing about Kim Kardashian and what she did, blah, 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 right? So Girl Rising sort of plays on the same human instinct to want to know more about other human beings, but I would argue, for a much more productive outcome.
Oh, come on. You subscribe to The Inquirer.
Right?
Yeah.
But that's what The Inquirer is storytelling.
It is,
so
without a doubt.
If you can make someone care about an individual, and that's why, as you said, do you take them there? Yeah, if you can, but that's a heck of a long way to go. But that's why I believe that media has an incredibly powerful role to play, especially, video. It has a real role to play in social change because it humanizes issues. I like to point. Sorry, I'm a bit of a run-on sentence. I'll tell you. I'll pause in 1 second. I like to talk about the progression in this country of gay marriage and the acceptance of gay marriage. And, you know, I see the roots of that whole movement in Ellen kissing a woman on her show. And
Wow.
if you look at that moment in history, what Ellen did by publicly kissing a woman on her show, one of the most popular television shows, you know, on the air at that time, is she said, "You love me, then you need to know this thing about me."
Right.
And it's very hard to hate. It's very hard to other someone who you think you know.
Now you're using a
or
philosopher's
who you love,
language. I love it.
Right?
It's great.
And I would say the same for Bruce Jenner. Transformation into Caitlyn. He did more by publicly transforming into a woman for the conversation around transgendered people than years and years of advocacy on the streets of New York or, you know, protests, or because everyone knows Bruce Jenner. He's an incredible athlete. And he took what was a conversation that I probably couldn't have had at a dinner table in my very conservative New York City suburb, and he cracked it wide open. And change only happens when you create an environment for conversation.
Nice.
Right?
Yeah, it's beautiful. So listen, I don't want to miss out on this question. You sound incredibly positive to me, and motivated and passionate and committed to this cause and this initiative. But I think that's probably just a lot about your personality, but it's probably about the initiative as well. Are things really changing? I mean, are they systemically changing?
For sure. Definitely. Yeah, you can't stop progress. Oh, yeah. And they're not changing because of Girl Rising alone. I mean, that would be ridiculous, and I know that's not what you were insinuating, but Sheryl Sandberg, Marissa Mayer, Hillary Clinton, Tina Brown, Cherie Blair, Aung San Suu Kyi, Prime Minister Merkel. You know, one of the reasons that things are changing, and it's the same as Viola Davis, right? Things are changing because the world has changed, and women can only the things. Once you're in power, you can start to change things, right? And so the numbers have been against us because until the 1920s, we actually couldn't vote in this country. So it's been a long slog. And, you know, Gloria Steinem and the whole 60s revolution, like, they really laid the groundwork. But it's just that the numbers are with us now. And so you can't put that genie back in the bottle. And it is slow, but equality is equality, and justice is justice. And what I would say is I look at something like the baby goods industry, because I'm a realist too, right? Economics are a driving force in any change.
Sure.
And I look at baby products. So when I had my babies, it sounds like we're a similar track, but, you know, it was 2002.
Okay.
I had my first child. There was only one stroller on the market, really. I mean, there were some, but McLaren had the corner on the market.
only one a responsible parent would buy is what you're saying.
Yeah, the responsible, and who obviously economically had the economic wherewithal, because I think it was about $100 stroller, so it wasn't cheap. But you know But I'll tell you, that McLaren version of a stroller, you couldn't stroll on gravel or the beach, but I am of a generation of women who have gone into business, and somewhere along the line, enough women were in business, in the baby business, that someone woke up and said, oh, my God, there has been no innovation in the baby industry in 100 years. Right? And someone...
I think Oscar Wilde's wife had one of these,
Right?
Yeah.
And the baby wipe warmer. And, you know, when I bought my diaper bag, there were two choices, black or gray. There is a whole market now, totally devoted.
Yeah, it's true. What's that?
Baby apparel and stuff for the mom.
Yeah, 14 years later.
Right? Your cute bag, your cute stroller, your cute windbreak bag. the over-the-shoulder baby carrier that I carried with my first child was so freaking uncomfortable. I challenge anyone to have wanted to put that thing on.
Yes.
And now I just bought one for a friend. It's like a Cadillac.
Yeah, the Coach
right?
bag of diaper bags.
Exactly.
Yeah.
Right.
Yeah, that's awesome.
But that's because enough women are in positions of influence within the companies that make that stuff that they were able to say, look, there's a gap in the market. You guys should, we should be making this stuff. So I see it all over the place, and it's really just about time and progress. And it helps to have a lot of visibility.
When we got to wrap it up in a couple minutes here, but tell me when you face a challenge, when you face somebody, not necessarily a man, I don't want to be that divisive out of the gate, but usually somebody pushes back on you. Oh, come on, Holly, really? This is, or does that not even come up anymore? Is that not even an issue?
I'll never remember I was in Gabon, and I was at a conference for, the weekend was a business conference, and then the Monday, the First Lady had organized a conference for women and girls. And I was in the lobby on the Sunday, I think, and, a gentleman in a business suit sidled up to me and said, so, why are you here? Welcome to our country. Why are you here? And I said, well, I'm here for this business conference. When do you leave? And I said, well, I don't leave till Tuesday because I'm staying. There's a conference on women and girls for Monday, which is really women. I think I just said women. Conference for women on Monday, which is really the reason I came. And he looked at me and he literally laughed in my face. And he said, so what's Tuesday, kids?
Man.
Right? But honestly, he thought it was ludicrous that there'd be a conference for women. Absolutely ludicrous. He didn't mean to be rude. He just thought it was ludicrous. Thankfully, that's only happened one time.
Yeah.
Because here's the good news. Every man I've ever met has a mother.
It's true.
And
yeah,
most men I meet have either a sister or a daughter.
Yeah.
And to the point that I made earlier, that it's the power of, I've experienced that, or I know someone like that, or I love that person. How can you be against something that's 50% of the population?
Yeah.
And who represent people you love and admire and respect. And so it's actually not, and even in the developing world, in cultures like in a place like Afghanistan, where there's so much tradition of keeping girls back or keeping them, under the Taliban, of not sending girls to school, et cetera, most dads just want the social permission to have their daughter lead the best life. Most dads and mothers just want to know that by educating their daughter, they're not wasting their money or doing something, or that she won't find a maid.
You got to wonder if, Holly, in some cultures, if we all on some level, I'd like to think, know deep down that this is fundamentally wrong. And yet they're collective ideological BS,
that's exactly what it is,
yeah,
right? It's like collectively, did we all know that segregated water fountains was wrong?
Right.
Or a better idea would be tobacco. Like collectively, for a long, long time, we ignored the fact that tobacco was killing people, but because it was cool and fun to smoke. I mean, I look at Paris, right? Paris was a bottle of wine and a cigarette.
Mm-hmm.
But then if you collectively, if you change hearts and minds, both from the, policy level, so if you create laws like you can't smoke inside, suddenly you get out of smoke, it's really uncomfortable, you're standing in front of the building. But then you also create energy around clean, healthy living and your health and being, right? And suddenly the worm turns, and suddenly smoking is no longer cool, it's gross. And so in one generation, you can move from something being central to a culture like smoking in France to you're not allowed to smoke in cafes in France. And so a younger generation is now growing up probably not thinking smoking's such a hip thing. And so, it's just, to me, this is the missing place, a missing place in development generally, and which is why we as journalists felt that we had a role to play, which is you can deliver all the backpacks in the world that you want, and you can pay for as many scholarships as you want, but unless you change the minds of the gatekeepers for the girls, you're never going to have the demand that will change society forever. So you actually have to start with attitudes.
It's good. It's great.
Which is what you're doing with your radio show. So you're making an impact by spreading ideas. Now, what I would say to anyone who listens to your radio show is that their experience listening will be much better if every time they listen to a podcast of yours, they ask a friend to join them. Because actually change happens in pairs or threes or groups. It doesn't happen by yourself.
Oh, that's interesting. Wow.
So if you're ingesting a new idea, try to ingest it with somebody else, because then you have a shared space for conversation.
Great. I so love that. I mean, that to me is the topic for our next podcast together, which I hope you'll agree to. But I love the notion. It's a great place to end, that change happens in pairs and threes and groups. I mean, it takes others, right?
It takes others.
There's an embrace. There's a community there. It's beautiful. It's
lovely. Because we're pack animals.
Well, I kind of think if we're wired for anything, it's relationships. That's
right.
It's kind of the way I see it. Holly, thanks so much for joining us today. I holy smokes, time went fast. I really admire what you guys are doing at Girl Rising. GirlRising.com, as it sounds. Holly Gordon, co-founder and CEO, joining us today. Thanks a lot, and I really do hope that we can do a part 2.
Thanks, David. I really appreciate your time and your interest, and I hope I didn't go on too long.
Oh, you didn't go on.
You can tell. You press play, and I don't stop.
Hey, not long enough in my world. So, but we'll look forward to a part 2. Thanks again.
Great. Thanks a lot.